Hey everyone, now that we've completed the montage project, it's time to throw the production side of things into the mix. And we're going to be doing that with our second major project of the semester, the interview. We'll be learning how to set up and utilize one or more cameras, audio equipment, and lighting in order to capture a professional interview that both looks and sounds top-notch. And by the time we're done with this project, you'll understand the structural, creative, technical, and interpersonal aspects of how to put together an amazing interview. Now, there are many components and practical considerations that go into capturing a professional interview. From camera positioning, to lens choice, to mic placement, the lighting scheme, the comfort level of the person being interviewed, your interviewee or subject, all of these aspects are critical to achieving a professional level end result. So let's jump into the lecture and get started learning about all of this and more. So what exactly is an interview? Well, it's a type of video in which a person, generally known as the subject or interviewee, appears on screen and communicates information about themselves, a product or service, or another topic. And quite often, L&J cuts are used with B-roll, graphics, photos, and still images to enrich and better communicate the subject's message or story. Now, there are several main components to an interview. Of course, the person being interviewed, as I said, known as the interviewee or interview subject. B-roll, which is video that accompanies the interview subject and helps to communicate what they're talking about to the viewer. Photos and still images are also used in the same way. And then graphics are often utilized to identify the person so that the viewer knows their name and perhaps a title or position that they hold. And graphics can also help to explain what the interview subject may be talking about. If it's something that's complicated, complex, graphics can help to simplify that for the viewer. And then music can help to set the tone, vibe, and energy of an interview piece. So let's look a little further into some of these components and kind of break them down. The person being interviewed, the interview subject. It's very important in production and post-production to consider the position of this person on screen and the direction that they're facing. Now you can see in the example here, my acupuncturist, Ed Choi, wonderful man by the way, helped me a lot. He's positioned in the frame so that he's off center. He's in the right third of the frame. And then you'll also notice that he's not looking directly at the camera. He's looking next to it. In fact, he's looking at me. I'm actually sitting next to the camera interviewing him. Now in subsequent videos, as we move through this project, we're going to get a lot further into how and why you do this. But for now, I just want you to know that most of the time in professional interview situations, you're going to have your interview subject placed off center and they will not be talking directly to the camera. Now because Ed is placed off center, he has what's called look space, also known as nose room. This is the approximately 2/3 of the left side of the frame where I've got a plant and a statue that Ed is actually sort of looking toward. And this negative space in the frame not only helps the composition of the shot when it comes to the subject themselves, but it also serves a practical purpose. It provides room for the lower third ID. You can see I've got his name and his title there. So this type of graphic, the lower third, is called that because it's usually in the lower third of the frame. And because Ed is placed off center, there's a nice balance that's achieved between the graphic and the interview subject. And then finally, we need to consider the size of the subject in the frame. You can see that Ed takes up a good portion, about 1/3 of the screen, and he's prominently featured. It's very important that your interview subject be the focus of attention, and giving them an appropriate size in the frame is a great way to do that. And I'm sure you can imagine, if I had a shot where Ed looked really small in the frame, it would make him appear much less important. And by extension, everything he says would be much less important. So whether it's in production when you're framing the subject up with the camera, or in post-production when you have the option to increase the size of the image and make the subject appear larger, it's important to utilize those options to get the subject to appear at an appropriate size and importance in the video. Now this is a diagram breakdown of exactly how I set up this shoot. You can see in the lower portion of the screen, I only used one camera, and I'm person number 2 sitting next to it. Ed is person number 1, that's the focus of the situation. And you can see I've got a number of lights involved here too. On the left, I have the key or primary light that is the strongest. that's illuminating the left side of Ed's face. And then on the right, I have the secondary, or what's called the fill light, that's illuminating the right side of his face. And you can see that side's a bit darker than the left side. This is a common way to create contrast and interest when lighting a subject. And then I've got a background light that's illuminating the panel that's behind him, the plant, a little bit of the statue that's over to the left, and a small amount on the right side of Ed towards the back, his neck, his ear, and a little bit of his hair. That background light can also be called a rim or hair light. So these three lights put together make up standard 3-point lighting. And again, as we move forward through this project, there are going to be other videos and a lot more information about this entire setup, in addition to adding a second camera and audio equipment. So moving through our list of components here, B-roll. B-roll serves a couple of purposes in the interview. One, it helps to strengthen and enrich the message that the interview subject is talking about. It accompanies them so that the viewer has a visual representation of what the interview subject is saying. And it's very important that the B-roll relates to the soundbite. Now, a soundbite is what the subject happens to be saying at that point in the video. And quite often, that's put together by the editor by cutting together multiple pieces of dialogue to make it appear that the person says something in a particular way. So it's important that the viewer see what the person is talking about. And I like to call this say dog, see dog. If the person's talking about a dog, well, then we should see a dog. If they're talking about a car, then we should see a car. Now, it really helps to engage the viewer if the B-roll has motion associated with it, not just a static shot of the camera rolling on something that isn't doing anything. So motion can come from inherent action of things moving in the shot, or the movement of the camera itself. Panning, tilting, zooming in, zooming out, rolling across the floor on a dolly to the right or left, that sort of thing. Those are all practical at the time of production sources of motion. But motion can also be post-generated. It can be done in the editing software utilizing motion controls to manipulate the image so that it appears that the camera was pushing in, or maybe subtly pulling away from whatever it was shooting. Panning right or left, tilting up and down, this can all be done in post using motion controls. So if you have video that has no motion in it and is relatively kind of boring, you can add interest by utilizing that capability in post-production. Pacing is also very important. It's the rate at which you cut. And it really makes sense to cut in accordance with the sound bites. So an example would be maybe you have the subject talking about a dog, a cat, and a car. Well, as the subject's talking about the dog, that's what we're looking at. And then as they begin to talk about the cat, that's when you cut to a shot of the cat. And the same when they start to talk about the car. So that pacing of the B-roll needs to be tied to the sound bites the subject is delivering. Now, B-roll also serves a very important second purpose. It covers the interview edit points. Now, what I want you guys to understand is that the interviews that you see, almost all of them, are highly edited. The person did not say what they said the way they said it. Most of that is done by the editor, putting together different parts of what the person has said, cutting out certain things that don't make sense, or pauses, ums and ahs, things like that, to make the person appear to deliver the point in a certain way. And when you cut those things out, you get what are called jump cuts, where the person appears to jump from one position to another on screen. So B-roll allows you to cover those things so you don't see them. And it creates the illusion that the person delivered the soundbite in a very smooth and easy fashion. And then finally, L and J cuts. So the interaction of B-roll with the interview subject on screen can be edited in a certain way so that these very special types of cuts are utilized. L cuts and J cuts. So an L cut is when the interview subject is talking on screen and then is covered up by B-roll as they continue to talk underneath it. So they appear on screen at first, then a shot of B-roll covers them up while they continue talking. And a J-cut is the opposite, where we are hearing the person talking while looking at B-roll that then stops, revealing the interview subject continuing to talk on screen. L&J cuts are very commonly used in most professional interviews. Photos and still images serve the exact same purpose as B-roll does. And all of the same things apply. They should relate to the soundbite. There should be motion, although there's nothing in camera, it's all post-generated with these. The pacing should be tied to the soundbites. They help to cover interview edit points. And L&J cuts are often utilized with these too. And finally, we're going to talk about graphics. Now, I mentioned the lower third before. You'll often see it spelled out with just letters as lower third, but you'll also very often see it written in these two other ways, lower and then 3RD and then L3RD. All of those refer to the same thing, the lower third ID. Now it's important that the ID actually relate to the image itself. So you can see here, in the case of Ed, there's a green plant, he's got a green smock on, there's a lot of earth tones in the image, so I chose to go with a green background. That helps it to really sort of fit in with the color scheme of the shot. And then I chose a relatively large font that's very easy to read, and I made it white so that it contrasted the background and pretty much everything else in the image, so it would really stand out. I would caution you against using really thin fonts or scripty fonts, cursive, things that are difficult to read to begin with, and also get lost in the image very easily, no matter what color they are. And it's important that the lower third ID accompany the interview subject only. So it appears with them on screen. And then if you cut away to B-roll while they're still talking, the lower third disappears when they do. Because it just looks really weird to be looking at a piece of B-roll while the lower third is still on screen, even if the interview subject is still talking. Now, graphics can also support sound bites with text, making something that's maybe a little complex or complicated a little more easy for the viewer to understand. And then graphics can also consist of company or organization logos that help to brand the video and communicate a professional presence to the viewer. So this really gives you an overview of what an interview is and the main components that it consists of. The person being interviewed, the B-roll, photos or still images, graphics, and music. And as we move forward through this project, I assure you, we're going to be learning about each of these things in much greater depth and detail. All right, my friends, that about does it for the interview project overview, and I'll see you in the video lessons.